Hi there, welcome back to the Rusty Lathe project. If you watched the last video that I did, you saw me making some chippings, and now you can probably make out that there are more chippings here than there were last time. So I have been using the lathe, and in so doing I've created some more of these little ferrules that I was making, and these are for a project down at the local railway club. They're not over critical on length, but I want them all fairly within tolerance, so I have been making them, and I've been shopping with regard to making them. I've purchased myself a Morse Taper 3 R32 Collet chuck, which we'll have a look at in a moment, and that goes onto this scenario here. We'll have a look at that in a moment. So the thing is, come across and have a look a little bit closer at this dangerous setup that there is here, which I don't want to use, which is why I'm hoping to use the milling head in this instance with this new collet chuck that I've purchased here, and that fits into this drawbar arrangement here, which we'll have a look how this all fits in this column here in a moment. So come across and we'll have a closer look at what is actually going on. So when I went shopping, I went for a chuck key to fit in this chuck, which I haven't been able to get one yet, so I'm still on this spanner, which is quite awkward to use. So along with the chuck key for this 3-jaw chuck, I was hoping to get some new jaws for it, which are these parts here, and I was hoping to get the most sticky out part there in the middle, such that the item that you're trying to machine would also be sticking out here, because even with a lot of tool overhang such that I can get into there to face it off, it would be very dangerous, because if I moved this the wrong way, this would be catching on the internal part of these jaws as they were spinning. If I just move that into there, just twiddling the two handles, you will see what I mean. It would be possible, but it would be dangerous. So I'd rather not do that, because whilst that's rotating, that's fine, but if I brought this out too far, then as the chuck jaws came round, they would collide with the tool and do horrendous damage to both the machine, the tools, and perhaps myself. So you would have to be very careful if I was doing that, and I would have a lot of tool overhang, which would give the springing board effect of a diving pool. So my intention is to replace this setup here with this larger vise here, and put that on with some adapted bolts into these T-slots, and then simply run a milling cutter over the top of this face here, which is uneven at the moment. The dimensions are not fantastically critical, but I want to be in a ballpark area with the same dimensions, so I'm hoping to use the milling side of the machine for that purpose. To which end, so let's have a look at this 3 Morse taper milling attachment that I've got then. If we look at the serial numbers on here, that's the serial number of the item, I suppose, and then it tells us it's a number 3 Morse taper and that it's an R32 collet chuck. So if we open the box and have a look inside, this is the collet chuck, and what happens with this it's a little bit like a drill chuck, in that you can put things inside it. But this collet chuck will give a lot more accuracy than a drill chuck. And these are the type of things that you should use in a milling machine or on one of these milling adapters on these lathes. We'll have a look at it. You take the top off, like that, just unscrew it, and then you would put into this the collet size that you're looking for, and you would push that in there, and it's just lightly held in there with a strange spring arrangement in there, but it could easily fall out, so do be aware that it will come adrift and might fall out and get lost somewhere or damage something or itself as it falls. So you must put that into there first, and then you can assemble the two together. And there you've got a multi-splined chuck. Instead of having like a 3-jaw chuck, we've actually now got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, maybe 8 or 9 points of contact on a circle, which gives great accuracy. When you put your tool in there and tighten this down onto your tool, it gives great accuracy of that tool actually rotating with the machine, so that you're not getting that kind of effect. You're getting a proper rotating effect. So that's how that works, and there are special spanners that work with this. Here's one spanner. You will put the spanner into those segments, and you can get purchase on it then to tighten it up. Because you can't get enough tension with your hands, so you'll put the special spanner in, and that would tighten that up. Then you would have another special spanner that fits onto this section here, and the spanner I've got has been modified for my other machine, so it won't fit this, but the trusty movable spanner will. And just adapt that to go onto there, and now with the two spanners we could tighten that up fully, such that it's as it should be, with a nice tight bit in the collet chuck. And that's with the two spanners. So let's have a look where this actually fits. This fits up the shaft of the milling machine, and that cone is a number 3 morse taper. You could get a number 2, you could get a number 1 morse taper, you can even probably get bigger than a 3. But that would go up inside there, and the reason I've got this particular collet chuck is because if you're using the milling machine to mill, you shouldn't use a normal drill chuck. And the reason you shouldn't use a normal drill chuck, it looks exactly the same. It's got the same Morse 3 taper on it there that would go inside the column of the milling machine. It would go inside like that. So that would be the normal chuck in there for drilling, and that's all you could do with that chuck, drill. You couldn't use it as a milling machine, because with this type of Morse taper unit and chuck, this is all one piece. It's all fastened together. But on the drilling chuck, you have the morse taper that would go into the machine, and then a second morse taper attaches the chuck to the morse taper unit that goes in the head of the milling machine, and that's just held on friction. So whilst ever you're drilling and the force of your drill is pushing the two together like that, that's fine. But if you were to try to mill and take that sideways across, you would lose accuracy, and this would probably come undone, and the chuck itself would tend to drop off, damaging the chuck, the head of the machine, the milling cutter that you've got in the normal chuck, which wouldn't give us greater accuracy because it's only got 3 points of contact instead of the many points of contact that are on here. So this is why we use a collet chuck instead of a normal drill chuck. This is all one item, and this is a couple of components put together with the idea that they're going to be forced together all the time rather than run sideways. And all of this setup then is held into the head of the milling machine with a drawbar arrangement. And this drawbar, I got the lathe with the drill chuck in, and this drawbar, as you can see, has got rust on the end of it. So when I tried to take the two apart, they were fairly well rusted together. The two threads were rusted together. And the idea is, I'll move the camera further away so you can have a look at this. So this is the drawbar arrangement, and when I got this lathe, as I said, I had great trouble separating the two because of the rust on the thread and in there. But the idea is, this is just a long bolt that goes into a threaded hole inside this morse taper. So that simply screws into there as tight as you can get that. And then when I'm playing about with the milling side of things, I always put a piece of plywood and perhaps a rag and such below the head here to catch anything that that might fall out of there, because as I said, these two can just come apart like that. So it's quite probable that something may fall, or whilst you're tightening the tool into this particular collet chuck, the tool might fall out while you're trying with the spanners to tighten it into position. So what I do, I get a piece of hardboard or plywood and just put that below the head to catch anything that might fall. Move that out of the way. So now I can put the plywood below there and perhaps put some rags on as well. Put the rags on and they may well catch anything and stop it rolling off the plywood. And then the idea is that this bolt, when it's tightened into there, as tight as you can get it, make sure it's in and tight, hand tight, such that it's got a good grip inside there now. And then this bolt would be tightened up into this head by this locking screw here. As you tighten this one down onto the top of this head here, it would effectively pull this taper into the taper slot in here, thereby tensioning the whole thing together pulling the top into the bottom and tensioning it together so that it rotates securely with the milling head. But as I said, with the drill chuck could fall if it's used in a milling orientation, so that shouldn't be done. Above the milling machine here, you should always ensure that you've got space to withdraw this bolt. It's quite a long bolt, and as you can imagine, from the top of the machine it would also need to go up into the sky. I've got a light fitting above my machine, but I can swing the light fitting out of the way such that I can get this bolt to come down. So the bolt just goes into the top like that. That would go into there, and I would tighten the top nut, and that would draw this morse taper up into there. When it goes into there, it will have friction with this head in there, which will allow me to tighten it up with the correct size spanner. So I would hold that with my hand, tighten that as much as I could with the spanner, and once that is as tight as it can be, or as tight as I can get it, then would be the time to tighten this other nut down onto the top of there, which would pull the whole of this rod up, giving more tension to this in this head. Put that onto there. And the other spanner back onto the top of there to stop that rotating, and then it will pull it up. Like that. So now this morse taper is tight inside this head. Then you would simply put your jaws inside the chuck, off the chuck onto there, and a good solid thump up should hopefully secure it there. But it could come down, as we said, if we were running things sideways underneath it. So you then take a soft faced hammer and on the perimeter of the chuck just help to secure it into place. If we wanted to take this out again it would be the reversal. We put the top spanner on, get the bottom spanner and loosen that nut up there. The top bolt isn't spinning because it's got tension there, and the way to get it out of there then would be probably with a metal hammer as opposed to one of these soft face hammers. And again, as we said, you need space above the machine, and you would simply hit that. Let me get the bigger hammer. Here we go, the metal hammer, and that should come down, and there it is. And then you can get the top bolt and remove it like that. So that's how that little lot fits together. Once it's all fitted together, you will have the top of the machine that would go on there to protect you from any belts, etc. And of course, whilst ever you're doing anything with the chucks or the milling head, you would have the machine turned off on the switch and at the mains as well. So I hope that's just given somebody an insight as to how the milling head side of these machines actually works with respect to the two different chucks, and some safety aspects about the machine. Okay, thanks for watching. Bye for now.